Hello and welcome to another episode of Other Record Labels. I'm your host, Scott Orr. This is where we talk about the art and culture of running an indie record label. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I hope you've checked out previous episodes before, but if this is your first time hearing us, make sure you do that. But thank you for joining. And today's podcast is with an incredible label from Delaware. And by golly, do we talk about Delaware a lot, because it's an interesting under talked about state in America. But today we're talking with Impetus Records, and I think it's a cool chat. You may not have heard of them, but at the end of this, you'll know a lot about them, and I'm very excited for that. If you haven't already, please go to otherrecordlabels.com and download our free guide. I told you, I don't know if I have told you about this before, but when you go to otherrecordlabels.com and you sign up for this free guide, there's a link to our Facebook group where a bunch of indie labels, and if you're not a part of a label, but you're thinking about starting one, or you're an indie artist, then you can still join. But you can come over to Facebook, and there's over 80 people now who've joined. That is kind of crazy to me. And I hope, and it's starting to happen, that there's going to be a dialogue where we talk about some of the challenges and find ways to encourage each other and discuss this industry a little bit further than what happens here on the podcast. So otherrecordlabels.com, and you can grab the free guide there if you haven't already. Anyway, thank you for listening. I check the numbers of the podcast like 3 times a day. I'm a little bit obsessed. And it's the growth over the past year has been incredible, and I find it really encouraging. And some of the emails and notes that I've been getting on Instagram and wherever has also been really encouraging. So thank you for that. Thank you for listening. If you have some suggestions or ideas or complaints, you can email me at podcast@otherrecordlabels.com. But seriously, thank you for listening. Okay, so first of all, we're talking with Diego and Olivia, and it's called Impetus Records.
Yep, correct. Impetus Records.
Impetus Records. Okay, so you guys are from Delaware.
We are.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's like a state you don't hear much about. Is that like an advantage or a disadvantage to you guys, as opposed to being somewhere more competitive like New York or California?
That is a really interesting question. Well, I think that the scene that we are part of, the community here that's based around Newark and Wilmington is where the record label itself is based.
Okay.
We have kind of paved our way. We've started to make connections with, bands and artists and people who are also booking shows and doing sort of the same things throughout the East Coast. I know that Diego has toured and has met a lot of people in a lot of different places. But I feel like sometimes people generally are like, "Oh, Delaware." Like, what
yeah.
Delaware?
I think there's a misconception that like people to build a scene, you need to either be like in a city or like that's really it. Like, there's this conception that you need to be in like a city that is like already known.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
Being
yeah.
And that's not. I'm a strong proponent of the idea of like locality, and I think that part of that means dealing with what we know. So the label itself, we only deal with Delaware-based bands because that is the scene that we are a part of, and it feels somewhat appropriate for us to seek. We work to document the bands that we know, and the bands that we know are the ones that we play with, and we.
So let me ask you, so you're saying that the bands in your label are only from Delaware? That's intentional?
Yes, that's intentional.
Okay.
That's part of the idea.
And I love that. I think that's a really cool thing, because especially from like underrepresented areas like Delaware. Hey, is that the first state? That's what I always see on the license plate. Is that what that means? It was the first state?
It is the first state.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, that must be something to be proud of.
It's interesting.
If you care.
Yeah. It's an easy flagship thing, but it doesn't play much into daily life.
Right. Into daily life. You guys don't like give yourself a high five every morning?
No.
I mean, I do that anyway. But
sure. Not because you're the first state. Okay. So, yeah but just, sorry, going back, I think that is a cool thing, because when there's unique places, not just in America, but unique places in the world, and they say, hey, this label is going to represent this city or this village or this group of people, I think it's a really cool thing. So are you committed to that long term, or are you willing to go outside of Delaware down the road?
I'm not too concerned with what the long term brings. It doesn't mean I don't care about the things that we're working on. It just means that, if I'm wondering what a band will sound like 10 years in the future, I'm gonna miss something that happens today. Right. So I spend time focusing on the people that already exist and working on that. So far, we've only done Delaware bands, and that is what makes sense to me now. I imagine that is what will make sense to me later, but I don't know that, so I don't want to say
that's fair.
How hard on that.
No, that's a good point, and I really do like that idea. And that's something I had kind of toyed with about representing only Canadian bands, and we kind of moved away from it at some point. But I think it's something that it makes it easier for fans to identify with, and then when there's fans from all over the world who are like, hey, this label is just Delaware bands. It just has a cool thing to it. I like it.
Yeah.
What's this? You're welcome. I'm just going to pause for a sec. Can you guys are you able to, I don't know how far you are from the microphone. Are you guys come forward just a little bit? I just get, there's like a little bit of distance.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's great. The audio sounds really good. It's really clean, and it's just there was like a little bit of distance. What's the scene like? Does the state of Delaware? I mean, we were talking about these kind of cliche towns, like Nashville or Atlanta or Brooklyn or stuff. But is there any identifiable culture that's exclusive to Delaware at all?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think so in music, at least.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to speak too much on the culture of the state as a whole, because I think it's kind of homogenized, much like the rest of the country, at least the East Coast. But especially within our scene, there's definitely a kind of a certain creed that has developed. I guess, I don't know, you can kind of tell when someone goes to shows at this point. They just don't really So the city that most shows happen in is Newark, which is right outside of Wilmington, and that's a college town where the University of Delaware is based, which is a big fraternity school, a big frat party.
Your cliche state school, basically.
Okay.
We have a couple different house venues that are actively booking shows. I live at a house that is the oldest running house venue in Newark. We've been active about 5 years. I've only lived there for about a year and a half, but it's been active for about 5 years. And throughout the past, I would say year and a half, 2 years, myself and a couple other of the organizers of the scene have been working really hard to create a more cohesive community rather than just okay, here's someone who's booking a show at their house and a bunch of these random people are going to come. It's we're actually trying to create something.
It used to be interesting. There used to be shows where it was all touring bands because there really weren't too many local bands to book.
Mm-hmm.
And now most bills probably have it, if not at least two. I know a lot of people will book just local bands,
cool.
it's
yeah, we've had kind of bands, especially, what am I saying? A lot of bands here, they come and they go, but I found that in the past 2 years, there's been kind of an influx of bands forming. A lot of new bands have formed, so there's a lot of opportunities for local booking, and, for us, there's a lot of opportunities for us to start representing new bands.
I want to ask you about the aspect of the college town, because I live in a college town too. A university is here, and you would kind of assume that it would bring young, cultured people into the city, and then automatically you'd have more people coming out to events. But that's not always the case. And I found it to be a little more difficult depending on what the university or the college studies. If it's not necessarily an arts university, then you maybe won't get those people out. Do you pull from those crowds, or are those people a little bit separate from your scene?
That's funny, because I study music at University of Delaware, and I found this whole scene through, in my freshman year, I met one of my now best friends in the class, and she kind of introduced me to this scene.
Oh, great.
I think sometimes it can be hard, because there's not really a way for us to go and like canvas on the campus and say like, hey, you look cool, do you want to come to a house show? But I think people tend to find their way to us.
I try not to worry too much about like the frills of college students. Like I never went to college, and I don't really. I understand there's a clear like demographic that could appeal, and we work to like promote, but I don't particularly try and focus on college students any more than I would, high school students or
sure.
Whatever. Right, and part of the reasoning for that is that we don't want this scene to be specifically for college students. We want this to be something that is for everybody. At least at the house I book at, our shows are all ages. We don't, turn anybody away for how old or young they are, and we want our scene to be something where anybody can come and feel welcome, as long as you're not in.
And I think that's really smart. I think your guys' outlook on that is smart, because I think there are disadvantages too. I mean, college kids aren't around all year, and they're gone in 4 years, and their commitment level changes all the time. So it's good to to grow a more stable foundation of fans.
Yeah, we worked pretty hard to a lot of people that, like Olivia said, they come and go. But that I also think that's part of just the nature of working in one scene. Like when you're working with a community of people, that will always change and grow. In the same way that I wouldn't expect like a restaurant to have the same menu forever.
Right. Does the university help you at all? Like, is there a radio station that you utilize, or can you promote stuff on campus?
Well, there is a radio station run by the university, but we don't. I think that the people kind of what is the word here?
They don't really. There isn't a lot of communication between the two.
It's some of the same people that help with the radio station that are also in our scene, and like there's a club at UD that books shows on campus, and I know a lot of us. I'm on the e-board for that myself. A lot of us that are in that club are part of the scene as well. But as for actually getting help from the university, we don't. There's not that much of that.
Yeah.
No, I get that. Okay, so let's talk about the label. When and how did this all come together?
Sure. So in 2015, I was in a band called Paint the Sun, and there wasn't really much of a scene to speak of. There was another band called the Subterraneans, and we had a couple friends that would come out to shows, and it was pretty much our two bands, and we would play shows, and that was it. There were probably about 10 of us. And so in 2015, that band broke up, and in 2016, just a few months later, the Subterraneans broke up. And Paint the Sun had broken up before we ever got the chance to record anything, but the Subterraneans had recorded a demo. So I talked with the guitarist from that band, and we had gotten together and we decided it would be a cool idea to put those two records out, since they would never see the light of day, and we wanted something more physical than like a release on Bandcamp or SoundCloud or something. It just seemed a little more important to us than just like a link. And so we worked to put that out. It was like a couple of us working on it. And then by the time the Subterraneans record came out, because during this time we still had to record the Paint the Sun record because it wasn't actually recorded when we decided to do that.
Okay.
It took us about a year to get the tape together to put that record out, and also to figure out how to put a record out, forms and, jackets printed and all those things. So by the time the 7-inch came out, a bunch of new bands had started forming. A couple folks from the Subterraneans had formed the band Naff. Everyone at Paint the Sun had eventually formed the band Merger, which is the band that I was in. We had friends that started a band called Think Machine, and that new bands were coming out, and then we started hearing about bands coming from Newark. And so we decided that it might make some sense to continue the label, because there was no scene, there was no real interest to be generated in what we were doing outside of our city. And so we decided to continue in the, just so that there was someone who would be able to take care of the music. We figured we could probably do a better job than trusting someone else, so.
Right.
Started
had you been exposed to record labels before? Like, where did that? Sometimes I'm curious how that idea pops into someone's head, because it's not as common as other careers in music. It's very niche. Like, what drew you to, a record label, or running a record label in general?
I guess everything I do currently, both like within the label and outside of it, is kind of all based on the fact that when I was 16, I had nothing to do, so I started a band. I don't really starting a record label kind of just made sense because we had more than one band that were looking to put something out, and we thought a unifying name might be to show the commonality between it. That's kind of still the idea for the label, is that like someone might not know the band Kobica, but if they've heard of Think Machine, they can find out that the two, most of the members live together and tour together and practice in the same space. It's the idea that like it's all one community, and it's a lot closer than people might otherwise believe.
I always found, and I mean, my label started the same way as yours, and I found that the real springboard for a label was for bands to share resources and to record on each other's records and to bring their friends to the other people's gigs. Do you find that like community aspect where people are helping it thrive?
Yeah, I think without that, it wouldn't be worth doing. I don't, the music is the reason for coming together, but I think the reason for actually sticking around and engaging with it is the fact that you actually have friends based out of it.
Right.
It's otherwise I just sit in my room and record something, which is not a put down. That's fine if people want to do that, but that to me, that's not as engaging.
Okay, so when did you officially say, get the name and buy the .com and say this is the label? What year was that?
So in 2017 we came up with the name, and that was kind of based off an impetus is something that would propel something forward. Sure. So we thought it would be a fitting name for there to have only been, probably at that time, maybe 8 to 10 bands. So we thought that, if there was something to propel the name of the scene forward, then it might, we just thought that was fitting for what we're trying to do. I don't know exactly when the name came about.
When did the .com come out?
The .com in 2018, we sat down and made a website. So that was a few months after the record came out. I actually made the website twice. So I had made the website and I accidentally reset the entire default settings. It was about a week before our next release came out.
Yeah.
So I had to spend that entire week, instead of promoting that record, I had to try and rebuild this website. I actually think I made it a little bit better. I have some issues with the website now, but that's not really but that was around the time Mike started helping out too.
Okay.
Because he's here now if you want to.
Yeah, Mike is here.
Oh, great. Hi, Mike. Thanks for joining us. Did you sleep in?
No. I was out and about buying food. 2 minutes after starting, I've just been silently listening and enjoying.
This is the first time, I think this is the first time definitely the first time I've had 3 people. I've had 2 people before. So congratulations to Impetus. This is the first 3-person interview ever.
Thank you so much.
Now that Mike's here, and I want to ask all of you guys, because I mean, for being a small and fresh label, it's so encouraging to hear that you guys have more than just one person who's committing their life to this. So, what do each of you do, and how many people are involved in the label?
So there's 3 of us. That's pretty much is the label. A few friends help out with here and there with other things.
I would say the 3 of us are the main.
Yeah, we're the people that work the most. Yeah, I mean, I handle pretty much a lot of the like administrative tasks. Like I meet with bands to kind of figure out like the terms for putting a record out and how that works.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I end up being the one that updates the site. But it's basically whatever work isn't getting done by the other folks, it usually falls onto me, which is fine. Just about delegating.
That's fine.
Right.
What about Olivia? What do you do?
So I actually came on board just about a little less than 2 months ago, I would say. I came on board very recently, and I handle marketing and promotion. So I manage the social media pages, and obviously I reached out to you and sent the email. So I was sending,
Thank you.
Promotional emails about our latest releases. Yeah, thank you. And social media, I handle all that. I handle our email list, which we're trying to get going right now. And then I just do whatever else Diego needs.
Cool. And Mike Clark. I had a friend in college named Mike Clark. That's your name?
It's a common name.
It's
like John.
Wasn't the drummer for the Animals named Mike Clark?
Yeah.
What about you, Mike?
Basically, when I first started getting on board with Diego, it was kind of the end period of the previous person, Peter, kind of working. So I really liked what was happening, so I wanted to join on board. And so with that, we kind of figure out the division of labor as the intensity and amount of work kind of piles up. Diego is a very forward and heavy work-oriented individual. So a lot of the times he will be absolutely swamped with things. And so I try to keep open. So anytime he says like, hey, this has been really swamping me down, and I have some things that would be, I want to put more priority into right now, I am more than happy to learn how to do whatever and kind of handle it from there. I was placing the order for the most recent release with the vinyl company and dealing with the representatives there for pressing it. And most recently, I'm about to document everything that we still have from the entire collection, figure out where we're going to be going from there, and just have essentially all of our books in order and transactions. I'm about to enter the accounting period of everything that has happened in the year thus far, as that can kind of fall by the wayside.
Good for you.
When big on creating and doing so much, a lot of the minutia of the administrative tasks can be kind of forgotten about.
Do you guys get along well?
Yeah, I think so.
I should hope so.
Yeah.
So far?
Hope so.
Mike and I both live here at Impetus House.
And then Diego's partner lives with me, so we see a lot of each other.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. Okay, I have so many questions, and I think it's really cool, like how this all goes out, has gone on and everything. And I forgot like the question I had while Mike was talking. Mike was so articulate that he just kind of distracted me. But what does a release look like when you? Because Olivia talked about marketing and promotion a little bit. This is such a challenge for new labels and encouragingly old labels as well. But what does a release look like for you when the record is done and ready to go? How far back do you start promotion? What kind of things do you do for promotion, etc.?
It really, a lot of it depends on the format. There's a pretty strong kind of international community for cassette releases. So if it's a cassette release, then it's that you can kind of put that out a little bit quieter, and but it's going to have a wider impact, kind of just because of the community that exists there. So a lot of times it's just like waiting for the release, the actual record to get back once it's been pressed. And then like, just mailing some out to certain blogs if they want to, like, if they're, primarily physical release based, we'll send it to them. And then, or it's just like mailing, emailing.
My first task here was basically, I guess, market research. I was spending the first task I had when I came on, I was scouring Facebook and, the internet and Instagram, and I was finding blogs and podcasts, radio shows, zines, et cetera, and I was compiling them into a master list, and then I would email them about our releases to see if anybody wanted to feature us or interview or review the album.
How did that go? How did that go?
It went okay. I think I compiled somewhere around 60, blogs and zines and podcasts, etc. And we heard back from less than 10.
Okay.
We heard back from less than 10.
That's pretty good. I think that's great.
There's some people we're still waiting on. There's a podcast out of Philly that we're waiting on to schedule an interview. And it was kind of hard for me. That was my first time doing some like really hardcore marketing, and I was kind of disappointed. I was like, I've emailed so many people and no one's emailing me back, but that's how it goes. So
yeah, I think that's kind of the nature of things, especially when we are working on a scene where like a lot of bands are relatively either new or haven't toured very much, or when we're documenting like one community, we don't have a lot of like breakout names,
Well, I think that's what's and one of the advantages that you can have, and you mentioned this a little bit with cassettes, is that like when you do a cassette release, even though the band is entirely unknown to the rest of the world, they can become quickly known just based on how cool the cassette looks, or even just by the fact that you've done a cassette and you've posted it to a subreddit or you've posted it to a podcast that features cassettes. So I think that's like gives you a little bit of a leg up.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the latest release was the first. It was the first cassette release we've done, and it's interesting. I've never, not for any reason particularly, but just on a personal note, I've always hated the cassette format. I think it's pretty terrible. Like in terms of audio quality,
sure,
it's not good, and I think people like it for that reason. That's confusing to me.
Okay.
But I try not to, it's not the hill I'm going to die on.
That's fair.
Same way that I don't really listen to a lot of digital music unless it's like unavailable elsewhere.
Right.
It's just not the format that I listen to. I will, if that's the available format, I will. But it seems silly to me to not make it available in a format just because I personally don't like it.
That's smart. That's very wise.
So we did a cassette release, and it's done pretty well. It's comparatively to some of the other records and stuff. So I also think that's a testament to the bands. But
and do you do digital with everything? Do you do Bandcamp and then Spotify, Apple Music?
Yeah, we've done digital release for everything. The only one, the first release, the Subterranean 7-inch, we didn't immediately do digital.
Okay, that's cool.
A lot of the members were still in high school, or not a lot. All of them were still like juniors in high school when that came out.
Oh,
and
wow.
so we thought it would be wise to let them try and like promote that in school.
That's smart.
Rather than tell people it was available.
Did that go okay?
Yeah, it went well. We were kind of surprised. I mean, we'd never put a record out, so we had no idea what that would look like. But we were kind of surprised with how well people, like how receptive. I mean, they were a pretty popular band when they were around. Like they would sell out like 150 like seated.
Wow.
Like, which is pretty crazy, considering that all the members were 16 when they broke up.
Yeah, that's a pretty nice advantage to have the ability to send someone to do marketing inside of a high school. I don't have that advantage.
Yeah, we went to, Mike and I both attended an art school in the area. It was Cap Calloway School of the Arts. I don't think that was as pivotal and central to the school as like it may sound. But there was a certain element of like, I think more than anything else, kids just want something to do. And so,
sure.
And so anyone that has some sort of creative outlet probably.
So let me ask Mike about this vinyl. So you're doing vinyl is aside from the 7-inch, is this a full length vinyl or tell me a little bit about this release? And I'm really curious about, the financial aspects of vinyl and some of the pressing challenges that are really common with vinyl and how you guys are dealing with those.
Well, we're actually still waiting on the test press to get back to us now. The vinyl release, in terms of any release that the label does, we like to leave the medium up to the bands. The vinyl press, what I was most surprised about vinyl pressing, because I had never gone through when we were doing the 7-inch, like I was not there for that process. So I, being the ignorant person that I am, did not know what all went into how to actually press a vinyl. So when you're filling out like the 7-page forms, there's a lot just like, oh, will you be supplying your own like cutting materials and metal? I'm just like, will I be?
That is a funny question. Yeah.
Yeah. So luckily with Diego here, it was very easy to be like, hey, you encountered this. And he was like, yeah. This is what I've discovered that meant over time. And I said, okay. And then there was another representative that I emailed a lot with at the actual record pressing place. And they were more than helpful and very understanding. So if anything, I learned a lot through that process just by sheer lack of knowledge and ability to research it or ask somebody who has more knowledge.
Is this a 12-inch or?
Yeah, this is the 12. So actually for a record for the band that I was in, Merger. Okay. And so we, it's a 6-song EP as a 12-inch, but it's about 20 some minutes, so it's just like a little too long to be a 7-inch.
I see. Okay.
But it's actually cut. It's cut at 33 just because 45 is kind of cutting it too.
Oh, okay. That's cool. And so, can I ask who you guys are pressing with?
Yeah, sure. So we're using United Record Pressing.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. So
I kind of thought when Mike was talking about those order forms, I was thinking that sounds like United Record Pressing.
Yeah.
Oh my God, is that not everybody? I just assumed that would be everybody.
It maybe is, but I remember these like really big paper forms that were very arduous.
They've actually updated things in like the 2 years since when we did the Subterraneans release, because you still have to fill out all the paper form and mail that, which I actually kind of like. I like the process of doing all that, but I mean, it's I think I like the concept of it more than I like the physical sitting down and filling out an entire form. But it's exciting.
Yeah. No, I get you. Yeah, I know that. And go ahead.
Sure. So, but in that time, we had to send over. What did we have to send over the first time? We had to send over digital files, and now they have like some sort of site where you can submit it, and the artwork you can submit it digitally. Where we had to like send the physical.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Everything physical, and that was like 2 years ago. So wow. I guess. Yeah, I had thought, I was like, oh, so I guess vinyl is just like really that old. Like, I guess like.
Yeah. You had to go down there and record it right there. Live.
You're right. Yeah. I had to send in the.
Now, which I actually think you can do at Jack White's place, which is right nearby. So can you tell me a little bit about how daunting vinyl is? I mean, for me, it's daunting. It's intimidating. It's expensive. There's the fear of shipping it and the cost of shipping them. Like, what is your strategy for getting these records in-house and breaking even on them?
So it's interesting. I think because it was our first release was a vinyl release. It doesn't seem as daunting to me because that was what we learned first. It was very confusing when our subsequent releases that were like on CD were like significantly less. Like they cost a lot less, and they also like sold in a different way, and we also didn't have to press as much. And so it was a very interesting thing where we're like, oh, I guess like vinyl is kind of a different thing, but since that was what we had learned, that's just what we knew. So I don't feel too pressured by it.
That's good.
Yeah, I think where we're at now, we're kind of understanding a little bit more. Like the first release I had paid for entirely just with money I had saved up. And so now we're kind of in a position where it's like, okay, if we're going to put a record out, like it needs to, if we're going to do it on vinyl, it needs to be a record that will sell. So I don't think we would do a vinyl record for a band unless they were like a heavily touring band.
Right.
And really intended to sell. I'm just not looking to create more plastic in the world than already exists.
Right.
And so it doesn't seem very beneficial to me to print 300 copies of something if I'm going to have 200 copies sitting in my, and like, for the next 4 or 5.
I have some of those.
Yeah. I mean, we do too. So, but Merger, we toured a lot. And so
is this a reissue in a way?
No, this is our first ever release. We put out a demo in 2017 and we've just been using that ever since.
Oh, okay.
We've toured a lot since then, but, and the demo is pretty awful. We'd only played about 2 shows by the time we recorded it. So we were a pretty new band still. But, we always wanted to wait because we felt that the demos, the point of it was to let people hear the music if they wanted to hear it and, like get us some shows, which it still did. It got the point across, even if the songs weren't as tight as they would sound or didn't sound, it was recorded on a 4-track cassette recorder. So it wasn't the most crisp sounding thing. So this is our first actual release, which has been a bit interesting to navigate because I usually, when I talk to bands, am kind of talking as like how the label has done things in the past, but everyone in the band has been on the label before and I'm also in the band. So it was interesting talking with them about like how things, a little more familiar with how things work, but also trying to see where they're at with it. And we all have to come to a consensus, so that was a bit more interesting.
So when are you hoping to, you haven't got the test pressing yet, or you just got it? When are you hoping to release this?
Yeah, I'm assuming, Mike and I haven't talked about that yet, but I'm assuming, I would want to say sometime in like the either very late summer or very early fall is kind of what we're aiming towards. It'll give us some time to actually promote it properly, I think, and then also, kind of just get a pre-order going and whatnot.
Are you waiting till they're in your hands before you kind of announce a release date, or how is that going to work?
I'd say I'd want to at least wait a few weeks after the test press, probably. Right. I don't know. I guess this is Mike and I have ever talked about this, so this isn't a hard.
I'm just curious. Yeah. Well, I mean, these are just kind of things that, I mean, there's so many like small questions that make such a big impact for labels who are in your position, and I hope there are other labels who are in your position who are doing vinyl for the first time, and it's. I mean, there's so many details to it, not just from the pressing standpoint, but from, like you said, pre-orders and release date and everything.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
You have a T-shirt. I love the design of that. That's a great looking shirt.
Thanks. Yeah.
They're almost gone.
Yeah, they are almost gone. So Peter Furman, who was the guitarist for the Subterraneans, that he and I had originally started the label together.
Right, and in the email to you, Scott, I actually made a mistake. Mike was not. I said that Mike was a founder, and that was not true.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was an interesting. I mean, Mike was in the room when I was filling out all the forms, and I had probably run some questions by him. So like,
kind of.
Yeah, the idea was to document 2 bands, and the 10 of us that cared about those bands were kind of all involved in some capacity. So
anyway, go on.
But yeah, so Peter was a guitarist in the Subterraneans, and he did the graphic design for the first couple releases. He actually left the label because he started a studio with someone, and like a screen printing studio, and so he basically just got swamped with work there and just didn't really have the time to work on the label, which is obviously okay. I just needed someone that would be able to like meet up with me more regularly.
Yeah.
And I lived with Mike, so it made sense. I'm thankful that we have a lot of friends that are artists, and also, I mean, the amount of people that have offered and do help out with a label that aren't the three of us shouldn't go understated. We have kind of like parties where people will come and like cut sleeves with us.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and people will, like we do vending events, and people will go to the events and vend for us. Right. Yeah. They'll table with us, and they'll do the legwork of like going out and promoting shows and those kinds of things.
And I imagine even the other bands too would help out, like people in bands.
Yeah, we've been, like most labels, we have no money. And so a lot of times it has to be a talk where it's like, okay, well, how is this getting paid for? If the label doesn't have as much money as it needs to put this out, or whatever the case may be. And so a lot of times bands, we borrowed a lot of money from a lot of different friends, and they've all been pretty understanding, because they all kind of get like when their turn comes around, they would hope that their friends would do the same for them. Right. So it's been a really nice communal aspect to it, that everyone kind of understands, like they have to put a little bit forward, but what they get back is like support from all of their friends.
That's great. I noticed I haven't had a chance. We booked this so quickly. I haven't had a chance to really dive into your catalog, but I listened to a little bit of Driver's Ed, which I really like. I noticed you guys do CDs, or you did CDs for, at least for them. I think that's cool. I think I know people who still sell them at shows. Is that something? What are your thoughts on CDs?
I like CDs. I'm a fan of CDs. And we definitely, at least at the shows, at the shows that are happening in Newark and in Wilmington, I'll find that most of the bands, if they have CDs, they'll come and sell them along with their merch. And, I'm a big fan of them. My CD collection is mostly DIY bands or bands that I've seen at house shows, and then I grab their CD.
Oh, cool.
So I'm a fan.
So are people doing, like, how big are the runs? Are they DIY, or like, are they homemade, or are they, like, do you know how many people are making?
Are you talking about the bands on the label, or
I guess in general. I mean, Olivia said she has like DIY bands. I'm just curious, but I guess specifically for your bands.
I mean, we worked through a pressing plant. There's a pressing plant in New Jersey that we've worked through in the past, and so we've always done like getting them printed, like actually in a facility, and then going to pick them up from the pressing plant.
Okay.
We've kind of always wanted to stick with the idea. We've had a lot of people approach us about doing like short runs of just kind of like, like CD burn copy stuff, which is completely fine and is definitely, I think, a little more affordable. But I think the packaging is interesting to me, and I like, at least for the label, I'd like to keep the a certain level of, like, I guess, appearance to it. I stick away from using the word professional because I don't really subscribe to that idea.
Right.
But
like legitimate.
Yeah, but like, I want. For me, the label is to prove that this can be as real as people want it to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's worth filling out the forms and, paying a little more money just to have something that like looks good.
Yeah, no, I totally know what you mean. And it when you do more quantities, it brings the cost down. And yeah, I think there is something enjoyable about DIY pressing, but I think there's room for both. I totally agree. I want to ask you guys, when I was getting started at the around this time, for better or for worse, I feel like I was really focused on, when it came to signing bands, I felt like I was really focused on quantity over quality. I mean, not to say that there was anything wrong with the bands I was looking for, but I was just, in order to legitimize my label, I felt like I needed to have 5, 6, 7, 8 signings, artists, bands, or whatever. Is that something that you guys have to temper yourself on? Like, is that something that there must be a lot of bands in the scene who are asking to join your fold or whatnot.
No, I wouldn't say that we've ever really focused on quantity. As a matter of fact, we've had a discussion multiple times about pretty much what kind of limitations, because especially when you're determining that you're going to be local strictly, that's kind of a factor in itself. And being record label that we are, our goal is never to be the single record label running. And ideally what we'd like to do is encourage as many people as possible to create and do what they want to do. So we were hoping that being the kind of niche label that we are, we could focus on the quality and releases that we want to do. And if people like what we're doing and their style or what they were looking to do didn't gel with what Impetus was putting out, then hopefully it would inspire somebody to kind of create their own thing and help do a label that's going to do more material in that end, whatever they want to do.
That's really
so
cool.
We made a very firm stance very quickly to say, like, no, what it's really about is releasing music that we would like to release, because compromise is not very much something that we're about when it comes to the quality of what we do. And that applies to everything, not just the bands that we're signing, but even like the media that we reach out to, the ways we try to grow, the ways we try to get our name out there. Well, before we reach out to anybody about anything, usually there's a discussion about like, well, does this fit the kind of idea and image that we have for what we want to do? Does this fit the ethics that we're looking to achieve? And if not, then what's the point? Growth at what cost, really? And so, no, that applies to everything we do, music included.
That's great. You did a better job than me. I think I was just too focused on adding names to my website just to feel legitimate. So great job.
Yeah. That's interesting. I were just talking about that yesterday a little bit. I was saying sometimes it can feel a bit discouraging, kind of thinking like, oh, like there's only like 6 bands, but there's so many bands in the scene that we'd love to put out. And then I think like, well, we put things out at the rate that seems appropriate. Not every band has recorded something, and not every band is a band that we actually really want to put a record out for. And not every band wants to put a record out with us. And so, like in the same way that like a year ago at this time, we had put out 3 releases, now we have 6, and we also, made a t-shirt, and we've recently started distributing for some other labels. And so it's just like, we're further along now than we were at this time last year. And the year before that, the label didn't exist.
Right.
So,
well, that's awesome. Let's talk about distributing for a second. You mentioned that. So are there good record stores in Delaware?
There's a couple. Yeah. There have been more and more popping up recently, which has been pretty cool because sorry?
Do you take your records there?
Yeah, we do. We've been pretty fortunate to have really supportive stores in the area. So
there's 2 or 3 in Newark,
and then 2 in Wilmington. So, and that's northern Delaware. We don't really. We're in Newcastle County, which is like the northern part of Delaware. Okay. So we don't really. Delaware is small, but we can't make a 90-mile drive just to drop off some records and.
It got me thinking about Delaware, and I've been there once, and I drove from like here in Canada, which is like pretty close to Niagara, and we drove from here all the way down to Virginia Beach, and we took the long way, which like went through like Maryland and Delaware, and then Maryland again, I think, and then Virginia. Yeah. It was awesome.
Yeah, did you go on that bridge? It's like 13 miles.
Yeah, it was terrible.
I've never been on it, but that seems incredibly terrifying.
Oh, it was a horrible experience. Yeah, the Chesapeake Bay Bridge.
I'm from Maryland, so be careful what you say about the Chesapeake Bay.
Well, no, listen, the bay is beautiful. The bridge is beautiful. Congratulations on everyone and their engineering feat, but it was terrifying. I did not enjoy it. Okay, sorry, that was a little tangent here but all I remember of Delaware is just driving along some small little highway, and then it was no longer Delaware. But I'll have to go back for sure. So the stores are supportive, and you bring your records there. Yeah,
they've been very kind of just happy to see that someone is doing something like this.
Oh, cool.
I would imagine there's a certain level of like excitement about music that you have to work in a record store, or at least to like your job, and so they've all been really happy and really supportive, and they usually, we'll make some sort of post on social media and they'll tell people about it. A lot of them, they do buy them outright. We try and argue with them a little bit when they try and do consignment, just because $5 to us is going to make a lot more of a difference than, $5 to them.
Right. Right.
And but most of them, we don't really have to do that anymore. It was a little harder in the beginning, with a few of them, but they've all grown to be pretty understanding and get that the records will actually, it will probably sell if we stop.
Well, that's great.
So,
Tell me about the shows and the scene, because you guys have like a little scene report on your website, and we've talked a lot about that. And Olivia was mentioning the house shows. I take it that plays an important role in the label. It's not just actual releases and blogs and whatnot, but the live aspect of things.
Yeah, that's pretty much the main aspect, I would say. Like that's, the people, it's interesting here. People don't put records out to promote themselves. They play shows, and
that's cool.
Most, like I said, most bands, they play a lot, but most of them haven't really toured, and so for them, they haven't really seen a reason to put a record out, or if they want to, it's just not really a thing that, like, it's not a priority. It's a thing that, like, they want to do, but they focus more on like playing a show, which I find to be really refreshing. This is where I come from, so I had not thought of that as being anything different until until like my band started playing in other places, and I kind of realized that was not the norm. Right.
Yeah. No. I mean that's. I think that is a great thing, and I think it's pretty organic and pretty natural. And the surprising thing too is, a lot of people are thinking today about playlists and digital part of things, but playing shows really helps selling physical media. So if you're pressing a couple hundred records, you need to play a lot of shows.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely noticed in my 2 years of booking at a house venue, I've noticed that around here, at least with the local bands, the physical music and the digital music doesn't play as big a role in building a fan base as the live shows do. I experienced it myself with my band, where we don't have any releases out yet. We're still working on our first release, and we have, a little bit of a fan base, and it's most of them are our friends, and they're fans because they're friends with us. But we gained that little tiny following through playing live shows in the town. And I think Diego was right. Around here, it's something that's very, very important to the scene and to, the cultivation of the scene.
That's a great reminder. I did a lot of that, and the bands that I worked with, I did a lot of that at the beginning. And then you start to get a little bit comfortable because you can release a record in the middle of winter and not have to play a show and get support online. And then you start to get a bit lazy. But I mean, it's a good reminder that the foundation of any band really does start live.
Yeah.
Let me ask, I won't take too much more of your time here, but I want to ask about what kind of challenges you guys encounter. I mean, you've been at this now for a year to 2 years, and I want to know, I mean, the people listening, I assume are in a similar situation as you, and I just want to know if you guys have any challenges you can share, or kind of stuff you deal with on a day-to-day.
A lot of it is navigating things that we've never done before. There isn't really a record label around here that we know of. That we know of a couple, like Jade Tree is from Wilmington.
Oh, okay.
But
cool.
that isn't really connected to what we have done at all, really. And so we've had no one to coach us through any of this. So a lot of it is just kind of like I'm building a new website right now, and it requires coding, which is not something I've ever done or had any interest in doing before. And now I'm finding myself in a position where I have to learn HTML and CSS so I can build a site. I've never filled out forms for anything other than like approving, doctor release information. So that's new.
a lot of coding recently.
Okay. Yeah. I know. And those are things, I remember we talked with Katie from Bayonet Records in New York. And in that episode, she was saying about how, like one of the bigger things was even just picking a name, and then picking a name that was available on Instagram and Twitter, and a .com was available. And then finding a logo that you thought was cool now and you'd think it'd be cool in 10 years from now. And so there's just these like little things that feel like they'd be the easy part of running a label, but may not be the easy part.
Yeah, I was pretty fortunate that, I worked with people that were all kind of like, everyone was kind of just excited. I hadn't even, like I said, like we didn't build the site for like the first like 6 months of the label existing. It just wasn't really like, the point was to put a record out, and then the record was out, and then at some point we were kind of like, oh, I guess we should probably let other people like outside of the city know that the record's available. And so the website just didn't even really seem like something to consider until it kind of smacked us in the face that was something that might be necessary.
Right.
So besides that, it's really just, like I'd say the normal stuff of like trying to figure out how to get like stores to buy the record, and trying to contact a distributor and stuff like that. But it's really just a matter of like, I think the beautiful thing of this whole punk thing, is that things matter as much as you want to put effort into it. You don't have to put a ton of effort into something, and it can be a very like laissez kind of thing.
That's a great point.
And that's nothing, and that's awesome. Like that's great. And then but it only matters as much effort as you want to put into it.
I got to write that down. That's good. Yeah. I mean, that is a really good point. And I know a lot of musicians and sometimes label owners who are modest and maybe like overly too modest, and they don't really invest in themselves, or they don't push themselves. But, that's kind of our job. Running a label is to invest and to socially invest as well. And that's a good point, man.
Yeah, I told a band once, I think they asked me like what we actually handle. And so I gave them like a little rundown of like what the label really does. And they're like, whoa, that's a lot. And I was like, yeah, well, we do this. We don't have to. Because a lot of it's bullshit. So like, it's a lot of bullshit, but if there's just like one group of people that does the bullshit. And like, and thankfully we're all friends, so we all get it.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Hey guys, thanks so much for doing this show and sharing, a little bit about your label. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for doing what you do. I wish I had known about this when we were first starting out.
Congratulations on the label, and I hope things go really well. And I'm going to stay in touch and keep an eye on the releases.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott.
And thank you for listening. You can find out more about Impetus Records by going to their website, which is impetusde.com. That's their name, Impetus, and the letters D and E.com, or on Bandcamp at impetusrecords.bandcamp.com. If you're in a similar position where you're kind of navigating the waters of starting a record label, or I know we have a lot of just artists who are listening who self-release their music and want to kind of navigate this scene a little bit, maybe do what these guys are doing and form a community, or take your community and form a record label out of it. I think that's a beautiful thing, and maybe doing so in your territory, wherever that may be. I've put together this little guide that summarizes a lot of the advice that we've had from our previous guests, and you can get that at otherrecordlabels.com. We also have a Facebook group that's 80 plus people, which is super cool. So come on over and join that. Go to otherrecordlabels.com for more information. And thank you again for listening.